claim just collapses.
Joel said Sheikhianna ran the Council of Florence argument. Pretty funny, not gonna lie. Oh boy, I can't wait to hear that.
Epistemic, right? The Council of Florence in the 15th century. This council was convened to restore union between the East and West. It included representatives from Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, 15th century. This council was convened to restore union between the East and... Okay, so let's discuss a historical example of this same occurrence, right? The Council of Florence in the 15th century. This council was convened to restore union between the East and West. It included representatives from Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, and the Byzantine Emperor, and the Pope, also with Latin bishops. Now the council produced a decree of union, which was formally signed by most of the Eastern Orthodox delegates under the leadership of the emperor. However, one notable figure, Mark of Ephesus, among a few others, refused to sign. He argued that the council contradicted Orthodox tradition as he understood it, particularly regarding papal claims on the filioque. Now, here's the problem. If all bishops are equal and there's no final arbiter, then who can definitively say whether Mark of Ephesus was wrong or right? Some accepted the union, some rejected it. In the end, the union was rejected by most of the Orthodox world.
Yeah, do you know why? Most people don't know why. Right? If you actually look at what happened immediately before Florence, or even before Ferrara, because by the way, there was two councils. Actually, technically, there was three councils. There was Basel, and then there was Ferrara, and then there was Florence. Florence was the final council that happened. Basel and Ferrara were both basically turned over, and they were moved over to Florence. Okay? If you actually look, hilariously enough, at the very end of the Latin Acts of Florence, they actually say themselves that other than the Greeks that were present at the council, their church did not accept this council. And that's because of the fact that prior to the council even happening in the first place, all of the patriarchs informed all of the bishops there to not accept any new dogmas under any degree. And that faith is currently secured prior to the council as the faith that is currently the tradition, as to not accept any form of new doctrines of any kind. And so when they were sent to the councils and then the bishops went against the patriarchs' decrees, because the patriarchs were not the ones who signed this, it was the legates of each church that was there. This what happened is that after these people did this, they were all excommunicated, the people that accepted the council. Right? All of the people that accepted the council ended up being excommunicated in some way, shape, or form. Sadly, though, obviously, Joseph, the Patriarch of Constantinople, he was there, but he died prior to the signing of the council. Patriarch Metrophanes was the one who took over, and then Patriarch Metrophanes was the only diocese out of all of the Orthodox churches who actually chose to concelebrate the Eucharist for 10 years. And in that 10 years, by the way, I'm not saying it's a coincidence, but low-key a coincidence, during that time, Constantinople was in communion with Rome, and Constantinople fell shortly after that. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, no, it's not as crazy as people try to say it is. It wasn't literally just St. Mark of Ephesus just spamming, no, this is wrong. There was a lot that actually went into this, and Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Antioch, all three of them accepted St. Mark of Ephesus' decision. The patriarchates actually accepted their decision, did not accept the decision of Constantinople. And they actually had a council about 2 years after Florence where they literally described, it's the anti-unionists. There was an encyclical called the anti-unionist encyclical from 1441, I think it was, where they described very clearly what happened and what they ended up doing without it, and what they ended up doing about it, and it was 2 years after Florence.
And Mark of Ephesus is celebrated today as a saint who defended orthodoxy. The council itself is now considered by orthodoxy to be a false union. Now, notice that we have a paradox here.
What?
This is celebrated today as a saint who defended orthodoxy. The council itself is now considered by orthodoxy to be a false union.
Yes, it is. Literally every single one. First off, there was a council that occurred right after it where they declared it as a false union. So that's not true. And then they had an encyclical where they made that claim. And then further councils that occurred after that, they always made that statement very specifically that Florence is a false union.
Now, notice that we have a paradox here. At the time of a council, it had full representation and formal agreements, yet it was later rejected. Recognition here is retroactive. Orthodoxy says, in effect, a council's authority depends on how it's received later. This is reception theory. The problem is that retroactive reception is circular and cannot serve as a principal method. You cannot know at the time of the council whether it is infallible. You only find out later. And
you can if every single patriarchate themselves actually signs into something as a pan-Orthodox acceptance. So you can know if something is already infallible on that degree if everyone participates. If not everyone participates in the council, then yes, it would not be considered something that is infallible in its own right until everybody accepts it.
Means a fallible process is producing results claimed to be infallible. Now, political pressure also makes this even worse. When we're discussing Florence, the Byzantine Empire was under extreme Ottoman pressure. Now, the emperor and the delegates were seeking Western military aid to preserve the empire. Their agreement to the union was influenced by desperation and fear of conquest. So now you have a council that is in.
That's one of the reasons why it's a false union, is due to the fact that there was a political motivation that came prior to the theology. There's a difference, right? At Ephesus, where there was a theological problem and then political motivations pushed that theology forward faster, which obviously we'll concede that there was a lot of political issues that occurred with Cyril. Sure, right? Cyril was a fiery man. Okay? But this is different because the political issue existed prior to the theological problem, right? That political issue that was already going on was the key factor in why the council needed to be held in the first place. That was not why Ephesus was held. Ephesus was held on theological grounds, and then politics got involved. It is not the same thing as Florence. Florence was started from as a political problem, as a please save us situation, and then they started discussing theology with the influence of the politics that was the pre what's the word for that? The primary issue. Ephesus is the other way around. Primary issue was theology. Politics got involved. In Florence, politics was the primary issue, and theology was just so happened to be involved.
Infallible, making doctrinal decisions under political duress. Later,
it's so funny that people always use this council, but they don't ever want to talk about Lyons too, where a very similar situation happened, but due to the fact that the majority of all Orthodox Christians in pretty much every regard rejected the council, right? So think of it like this. Lyons 2 makes the exact same claim as Florence does, verbatim. The council was already deemed as a false union and a false council that declared heresy. That is at the Council of Blachernae. At the Council of Blachernae, they dogmatized that the filioque is heresy, and that if it's denoted in this way, and this way, then it is heretical. At Florence, they denoted that exact same way. Therefore, even if I were to grant that St. Mark of Ephesus was alone, which he wasn't, even if I were to grant that, which, like I said, isn't even the case, he's actually arguing completely on proper grounds, because he's arguing already for what was dogmatized and pan-Orthodox by that point, which was that the filioque is heresy per the standards of Lyons 2. So Florence, even already making the arguments that it's making, is making arguments that were already anathema by the church.
later, Orthodoxy rejects the council and
So that's complete justification to reject the council.
canonizes the dissenter.
Just because there were people there that accepted the council, and hilariously enough, all of them accepted them on political grounds or some form of motivation that was external, not based off of the theology.
If
I think the only person I could maybe make an argument for that for was Bessarion.
recognition